Today we are going to start a new series, a 3-week series that's simply called Lead, and not led, Stephen Manley. Not led. It's lead. It's a long E there. It is a great element. He said you should just name your series PB for short. The elemental symbol for lead. And I was like, oh, only Stephen would do something like that. But no, but he did. Only Stephen. Sure, he's with me. So, all right. But this series is called Lead. And we're asking this main question in this series for us to all consider. The question is, do you see yourself as a leader? For all of us in the room to consider this question, do you see yourself as a leader? And I'm going to go ahead and answer that question for you. The answer is you are. Whether you realize it or not, whether you see yourself as a leader or not, you are. If you're a parent, you're a leader. Even if your kids are grown and don't live with you, you either have the capacity or the opportunity to lead them, because maybe they call you for advice, they ask you questions, they keep you in the loop on what's going on. You know, Mom, what should I do about this? Dad, how should I handle this? Well, what did you do? And maybe they don't do that, but they should. So there's the opportunity then to try to lead them even as they're grown, not just when they're little and you have to, literally put a leash on them in the airport so they don't run off or pull them out of the street, that sort of thing. But even as they're grown, as a parent, you're a leader. Even at your job, you're a leader. And you might say, well, I don't have a title or a position and I don't rank anything. Doesn't matter. Leadership is not necessarily just a position, but it's a decision. And so it's all in how we look at who we are. You have certain influence over certain people at your job. It's not all about the title. Sometimes because you don't have the title, you have more influence at the ground level than someone just because they have the position. Well, I have to do what they say, but I don't respect them, and I don't want to do what they say, but it's for my own sake I'm doing this. But someone who's on your level or even above you, you can have some influence just naturally. Even at your job, you can be a leader. In your family, you can be a leader, especially people of faith. We can lead in that sort of way. When things happen that are tragic in our family, who are they probably going to run to? Probably you. So you have those opportunities to lead your family. Even in your neighborhood, in your circle of influence with your friends, you should see yourself as a leader. Because maybe you're kind of the rock of the group. You're the emotionally stable one, and you get all these things from all sorts of angles. That's leadership. We may not see it that way. We may see it like, oh man, I'm just like the leader of the gripe committee or whatever with my friends. But it's a leadership opportunity. So when it comes to leadership, all of us should see ourselves in some capacity as a leader, and it's important that we do. And I would say especially if you are a Christ follower, a person of faith, it's important that we see ourselves as leaders in our everyday lives, because the message that we believe to be true about Jesus is the most important message ever, and it's worth sharing, and it's worth leveraging relationships to point people to Jesus. Jesus is the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest leader who ever lived. He didn't really have much of a title. He wasn't that well respected. In fact, he was murdered by people who did have the position and the power, yet his message has lived on for over 2,000 years. And so it's worth our investment in our lives of leadership, however small it may seem, however insignificant we may feel that our influence is. It's worth leveraging that to point people to Jesus. And so especially as people of faith, I hope that we see ourselves as leaders. And maybe today is Thank You Sunday. So maybe it's confusing that I'm talking about leadership on Thank You Sunday. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at really this morning the most important aspect of leadership, which is servant leadership. So when we're talking about people serving in the local church, that's how we're going to kind of frame our time here today. The importance of serving through the local church is a leadership principle, and the most important one there is. It may not be the most popular. If you look at a lot of how-to books or a lot of leadership books, it's I think becoming a little bit more popular in secular leadership, but it's taken a while to get there. But Jesus, a couple thousand years ago, illustrated that this is how leadership should go. It should be servant leadership. Not that I'm lording this over you, as we'll read in just a second, but as I'm serving those even that are sort of under me positionally, or those that maybe even consider themselves inferior to me, I want to have this mindset of servant leadership. There's an example in the New Testament where there are two of Jesus' disciples. There's James and John, and they're brothers. And their mother does something very embarrassing. She comes to Jesus one day, and she says, hey, Jesus, can you do me a favor? And he's like, okay, Mom, what's up? And she says, okay, so James and John, like, they're awesome, and they're my boys, and I'm looking out for them, right? So would you do me a favor? In your kingdom, could they have places of honor in your kingdom? Could one sit on your right hand and one on your left hand? Would you do that for them? And Jesus' response is, that's not really how this works, you know? I don't really get to divvy up those positions. That's what my Father is going to do. I'm just trying to do my thing, and that's his department. That's above my pay grade. God's going to decide who gets what seat. And then here's what happens after that. I don't know. I'm assuming they're all kind of gathered together because they hang out, all the disciples and Jesus hang out all the time. So it's probably one of those embarrassing mom moments where she's doing this in front of the group, right? She's doing this in front, Mom, not in front of my friends. You know, I could just imagine these two guys saying that. And so then the other 10 disciples, they have a response. And so here's what happens. This is Matthew 20. After their mom says this to Jesus, here's what happens. When the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, now, see, they're equating it to James and John. Their mother did this, but they're equating it to them. What do they say? They were indignant. They are angry. Because they're thinking, dudes, you think you're that much better than the rest of us? You think you're that much more important? You even got your mom to do your dirty work for you? You guys are awful. They were angry. There's about to be a rift in this brotherhood here. They're indignant. They're going to come to blows. But Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. Don't you see that even today? Like, you may have worked for someone that really wants you to know they are in charge. They want to keep you under their thumb because they can. They don't trust the people underneath them because they have this, sort of complex about I've got to be in charge and I've got to micromanage. Maybe you've worked for some of those people. I think even some of people even in the political arena sort of have this thing. I'm about keeping my position, my power, my job more than anything else. But Jesus says, but among you it will be different. Well, how? And here's where it comes down to. Jesus says, whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant leadership. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. And then Jesus goes even a step further. He doesn't just say, this is good for you guys to do. He says, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That word even is important. Because Jesus is saying, hey, I am in charge of this group. The Son of Man, I am God. There's like nobody above me, right? So, but even the Son of Man is I'm not just preaching this, but I'm practicing what I'm preaching. I'm not just saying, hey, you guys over here beneath me, you guys need to learn to serve people and serve each other. He's saying, no, that's my whole mission, is to serve mankind through my own death. And even through his life, the Bible says he constantly went about doing good and healing all that were sick and oppressed of the devil. His whole mission from start to finish was about servant leadership. And again, he doesn't just talk a good talk, but he walks the talk as well. Because as you fast forward a few weeks or months after this in John 20, the disciples and Jesus are gathered together for the Last Supper. They're in this room together. They're about to have their final meal together the night he's going to be handed off to be arrested and crucified the next day. And what does he do? The very first thing before the meal, it says he gets a basin of water and he's going to wash his disciples' feet. This is important for a couple of reasons. The first thing is, just think about that for a second. Like even now, I didn't bring a basin of water. We're not doing a foot washing service, okay? We're not doing that today. We gave you breakfast. That's as far as I'm going to go with servant leadership today is breakfast. But he gets this out. And I mean, so like they walked with maybe no shoes or sandals at best, walking everywhere, dusty roads, dirty roads, muddy roads, animal feces on the road they walk in. They don't get to wash regularly, so maybe haven't had their feet washed for a few weeks at this point. Jesus decides, I'm going to get down and do this. The second thing culturally that's important here is that this is what you would do when you invite a guest into your house. The first thing you do is wash the guest's feet. But not just anyone does this. The lowest of the low servant, the entry-level servant job is the foot washing servant. So Jesus is saying here, hey, I'm the leader, but I'm going to take the place of the lowest of the low and serve you. That's what Jesus says. He doesn't just say that you should do it, but I should do it. He doesn't just say that I should do it, but he exemplifies that even in this moment. And think about this. Even Judas is at this meal, who a couple hours after the meal turns him over to the authorities to be crucified. Jesus washes Judas's feet too. That's a different sermon for a different day, but just let that sink in for a second. Even Jesus, knowing that this is going to happen, he still does this anyway, even for someone that doesn't deserve it at all. He exemplifies servant leadership. And so if we are leaders, which we should see ourselves in that way, we should try to be servant leaders. And one area to do that is within the local church. One area that many of you are servant leaders is right here. And so what I want to do today is go through this word serve, S-E-R-V-E, and look at 5 aspects of servant leadership and specifically how it fits within this context in the local church. The first word that we want to look at today then is sacrifice. The essence of servant leadership is sacrifice. Today is also a very significant day. It is November 11th, and is it 11? Did I time this perfectly? It's a little bit after 11. So about 10 minutes ago, 100 years ago, World War I ended. And so it's Armistice Day or Veterans Day. So if there are any veterans in the room, do you want to stand really quick and we want to honor you? I know we have a couple that aren't here. And a couple in the kids area, thank you so much for your service. You know what it is to serve. You know what it is to sacrifice. And we know what that means. And so I'm glad that we have this day at least once a year. And we should do it probably more often. And hopefully we do personally. To remember that people gave of themselves for a bigger cause than themselves. And that's why we're here. And that's why we have the freedoms that we have. That's why we got to vote on Tuesday, was because people laid it all on the line so we could have those freedoms. Sacrifice is a big thing. And it's also true with this church, with servant leadership being a part of the local church. There's an Old Testament story about a great plague that was over the nation of Israel. And it says in 2 Samuel 24 that at this time in this history, 70,000 people had died from this plague in a matter of 2 or 3 days. 70,000 people. And so David decides he's got to do something about that. He's the king at the time. And so here's what he does. 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 18. Here's what happens. That day Gad, he's the prophet at the time, he came to David and said to him, "Go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite." So David went up to do what the Lord had commanded him. When Araunah saw the king and his men coming toward him, he came and bowed before the king with his face to the ground. "Why have you come, my lord?" the king Araunah asked. David replied, "I've come to buy your threshing floor and to build an altar to the Lord there so he will stop the plague." And here's the response. He says, "Take it, my lord the king, and use it as you wish," Araunah said to David. "Here are the oxen for the burnt offering, and you can use the threshing boards and yoke oxes for wood to build a fire on the altar. I will give it all to you, your majesty, and may the Lord your God accept your sacrifice." But the king replied to Araunah, "No, I insist on buying it, for I will not present burnt offerings to the Lord my God that have cost me nothing." So David paid him 50 pieces of silver for the threshing floor and the oxen. David, through a heart of servant leadership, could have taken this as a willing offering for free. But he says, "I won't give something that costs me nothing." That was the attitude of King David. That's servant leadership. And really, when it comes to the local church, the work that's done here, whether it's on Sundays or even through outreach, requires sacrifice on different sorts of levels. And really 3 different types that I'll cover just for a second. There's time, talent, treasure. Those are the 3 main sacrifices when it comes to work in the local church. There's time. So people on the setup crew, we get here early. We get started early, and we are here late. And if you help tear down, you're here later than you would otherwise be if you just right out the door. And so you miss a lot of kickoffs for Chiefs games, all right? So I'm going to try to get done so we can maybe miss a little bit less of the game than we have the last few weeks, but we'll see. But it's a sacrifice to do those kinds of things. Your time is the only commodity that cannot be renewed. It's the only non-renewable resource. And so when you give of that, it's a big deal. So the time sacrifice that's given through serving this church is important, and I thank you for that. And then there's the talent. You give of yourself when you serve the local church. So, the setup crew, we give our muscles, right, which I don't have much to spare. but we do it. If your talent is organization, the setup crew, teardown crew is great. It's a great thing to use that talent. People, if you're a people person, being on the first impressions team with greeting is a way you can use your talent through the local church. If you have musical ability, talk to Stephen Manley, and he will decide if you have musical ability. Here's a good one. So a great talent for our 1C Kids volunteers is patience. Because you're dealing with kids. So the patience is a good thing to have. And here's the thing. Maybe you haven't found a match yet. I have this sort of gifting, or I have this sort of leaning and I don't really see a way to do that here. Well, let's talk about that. Let's find it. Let's get creative. Maybe there's something that we haven't done because we haven't had someone with that ability to pull that off. Maybe that's a great way to start something new. Maybe there's something that we can work out to make that happen. So the time and the talent are part of the sacrifice in giving to the local church. And then there's the treasure. It takes money to fulfill the mission. We already talked about the things that we're doing in the community this holiday season. It takes resources to do that. And that's a sacrifice, because I could spend that 10+% on other things for me, for my family. And yet, right, as a Christ follower who is Bible-based, I'm going to go by what the Scripture seems to indicate, and that is the 10% goes to the Lord, and then anything above that is an offering that just goes to do even more. And so that's a sacrifice, and it should be noted that that's a big deal. To give up your personal income for the work of God is a sacrifice, but it's always worth a sacrifice. It's always worth whatever it is, whether it's time, talent, or treasure. It's worth it. And on this Thank You Sunday, it's absolutely appreciated. So thank you for your sacrifice to make this church do what it does. The second word is energy. So we have sacrifice and energy. So servant leadership in the local church requires energy. And energy requires energy. So you look at like solar energy or wind energy or even electricity, there's an initial force of energy that we harness to then use for a certain purpose. So it's energy takes energy. And so the energy that we even use here at the church, the energy that we want to be in the community, requires energy from everyone within the church. That's just how it works. But here's the thing, though, and this is where I struggle, okay? And I'll tell you why in a second. So the energy, though, it is about us, but it's not. So part of my issue is I feel like I have to do more, be more productive, do this, do that, be so busy, creating all the energy. But you know what eventually happens? You hit a wall. You wear out. You burn out. So while we are creating the energy that the church is moving through, we are not the ultimate source of that energy. And if we try to be, which is one of my downfalls, I've got to make it happen, right? I've got to do more and be more and whatever. It eventually will implode. And so we want the source, and that's what in Zechariah chapter 4, God says that his work is done not by might nor by power, but how? God says, by my Spirit. It's how everything is done. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul talks about, he says, I will boast in my weaknesses, so that Christ's power can be made more manifest through me. And he says that when I am weak, then I am strong. When I can learn that the results don't rest on me. When we realize, yeah, it takes energy from us collectively to do the work that God wants done, but he's the source of the energy, then we can make it. Then the energy goes a lot further when we are people of the Spirit that say, okay, I'm going to take my source of energy from him to help me propel forward the mission of the church. It's a big thing, and I think sometimes that gets lost, especially with me, just being a doer and a worker, and let's get this done. I can do it hard enough, long enough, fast enough, and it'll happen. And it's like, well, it will for a while, and then it's going to fizzle out. But if we're tuned into the power of the Holy Spirit working through us, the mission of a church can go forth a lot better. So serving does require energy. So thank you for your energy that you bring to the church, and whatever way you serve and however it is, that means something. And collectively, our energy together, infused with the power of the Holy Spirit, is effective not only here, but in our community. The third word is relational. Serving in the local church is relational. Serving is all about people, right? And so even serving a local church, it's a great way to build relationships. Serving through the local church is a great way to build relationships. And maybe you even notice that. So maybe you're on like the greeting team and you have lulls between people coming in. You get a chance to connect with whoever you're greeting with. You get a chance to learn about their life and their family and their interests and their hobbies and just about them. It's a great way to build. Even as we set up and tear down, you have a chance to chat in the middle of that and get to know how was your week and what's going on and how can I pray for you. It's great relationally. Serving has a relational benefit. Even, sometimes in 1C Kids, you might get to see a different side of someone working with kids that lets you in a little bit more on who they are. Well, they're kind of a fun person. I can enjoy being around them because I see this in them. There's a relational aspect to this. Even planning teams. So if you're interested in helping Kim with this, even Christmas stuff coming up, getting together is not just about, hey, let's nail down these bullet points and we're done, but it's about visiting and being invested and involved in the lives of other people within the local church. There's a relational aspect to that. There's the uniting aspect to it relationally, because it's not just saying, look what I'm doing, it's look what we are doing. Look what God's able to do through us. There's something about that, the team building aspect mentally, that we're united here. We're a force to be reckoned with for the kingdom of God, we're better together than we are separate. There's a uniting factor even to serving in the local church. And it really creates sort of a family dynamic. That's why, a thing like today with this breakfast is really cool just to kind of sit down and visit. It's a relational aspect. And so that's one of the reasons that we like to do that. And someone mentioned about doing another one here in the next couple months, just to get together. The relational aspect through serving through the local church is so important because you don't fall through the cracks as easily when you're part of a team, part of a family. People will notice when you're not here and they can keep up with each other and we can really do life together as it was designed to be done. There's a relational aspect to serving in the local church. There's also a different relationship that's key in serving, and that is our relationship with God. So one way to say it would be this way: as God works through you, he also works in you. This is maybe a benefit that is very much overlooked, but it's maybe one of the most important. Sometimes we get this backwards, because sometimes we're afraid to jump in and volunteer. Well, I need God to work in me first and fix me and work on me, and then he can work through me. Well, no, not really. I mean, he'll work through anyone that's willing. And so in this process of him working in us is continual anyway. We never reach a certain level that we're like, yep, now I'm ready to go. Now I'm, perfect in every way and I can serve freely. No, it's like as God works through you, even through the local church, he will continue to work in you. And even sometimes to a greater degree than he would otherwise. By that I mean this, because we go from, in serving in the local church, we go from being a spectator to being a participator. And that's terrible grammar, but it's great preaching, so I'm going to use that line, all right? We go from watching and sitting and observing and consuming to then contributing to the work that's being done. And that factor doesn't just play in on a Sunday morning when you're greeting once a month, or you're in 1C Kids a couple times a month. It has impact Monday through Saturday as well. Because here's what I'll say, and you may disagree, that's okay, but here's what I'll tell you. My experience says this: you show me someone who's invested and involved in their local church, and I'll show you, by and large, a stronger Christ follower than someone who is not involved in the local church. It just does something God can work, I think, even more, again, in us as he works through us. As we're invested and involved in the mission, it does something in our spirit. It does something in that relationship even with him that we become closer because we're more invested in it. I've got skin in the game, right? I've got blood in the cup. I'm part of something that's there, not just watching it happen and being in it. It's being part of that. So that's what I would say. There's this sometimes false dichotomy of spiritual Sunday and mundane Monday sort of thing. But again, it all bleeds together. So the more that we're invested even in the work of the local church, the more it has an effect, I believe, the other 6 days of the week. The fourth word I want to share this morning is the V, and that is value. You show value in the church by serving the church. And this idea is really true in any area of your life. When we see through the lens of servant leadership in any area of life, it will change how we approach those areas of life. For instance, as parents, especially if you have maybe younger kids, sometimes we just see them as, oh my goodness, I just have to keep them alive. Okay? That's fine. I just have to keep them from not dying today, and I've checked the box. Or my job is to just tell them what to do because I'm the boss. Sometimes we have that, and then we go through seasons and phases where that's just our mindset. However, I think as parents, if we can see, no, my job is to serve my kids and shepherd my kids and lead them to be the people that God has destined for them to be, we will see that relationship a lot differently. A lot less, like Jesus said, lording our power over them. Just do it because I said, and I've said that. So I'm as guilty as anyone. I said I would never do that, and I have done that. And there are moments where we don't get it right. That's part of life. But again, seeing even that relationship through a servant leadership lens will change even how we behave toward and around our own kids. Even at work, if you see your influence at work as strictly project management, well, you'll get the job done, but you're going to limit your influence. But if we can see it as people management to get the project accomplished, that influence is going to just be exponentially greater. Because people will see that you have an interest not just in the job getting done, but in those that are getting the job done. And that's going to have a lot more even personal influence than just get it done, do it, rah, 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 bullet points, meetings. It's very, very formal, very official. But as we invest in people through servant leadership, even without the position, that can have huge dividends. And even in other personal relationships. Like, again, maybe you're sort of the strong one in your group of friends, or in the neighborhood, you're kind of the go-to family. Take that as an opportunity to serve those people in your life. Not just as, again, I have to hear all the complaints and I have to make all the decisions, and it's all about me making everything work for everybody else. But see that as an opportunity to serve them, and it'll change the way that we interact with our neighbors and our family and our friends. We'll see it as my time is important and I'm going to use it to serve them. I'm not going to complain that they're sucking the life out of me, but I'm going to see it as a chance to, okay, I'm going to try to build you up in this situation. We're going to try to work through these things together to make this community stronger, to make our family stronger, to make our little circle of friends even stronger for one another. But it's true in the church as well. If we have this mindset of servant leadership, we're showing value to the church, because we say, I want to be an active part in what's going on, not just sitting back and watching what happens. I have a vested interest and investment in what's happening here, not just being sort of having a secondhand benefit to that. So you show value by serving the church. And so your investment and involvement in this church is important. It matters. And it shows that you value what happens in the church and how things happen, what we're doing, because you're an active participant in that process. And it leads to the final word as we close today, and that is essential. Essential. Let me just say two things about this. First, you matter to this church. Every person in the room, every person listening who's not even here, all the kids workers and even the kids matter. Every one of us matter. That's the whole point of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, as Paul says, hey, every person matters. Every part matters. We have to have, you would think we don't need this certain part. Well, you do, because it's there. Everyone in this body matters. And then on top of that, how you serve through this church matters. And you may not think it's a big deal. I just do this, or it's not this big of a deal, or I just volunteer once a month, or I don't even do this very often. Whatever you do makes a difference. It matters. Because, again, it's a collective effort. It's not about one person or two or three people trying to do everything. It's about all of us together coming for this common goal, what's bigger than ourselves, to accomplish what we otherwise could not accomplish. It takes everyone doing their part. So let me just list some things, especially on Sundays, that matter. So curtains going up and down matters. It creates this sort of little atmosphere in here. People being greeted warmly matters. It's a big deal. Maybe one of the most important things that we do here on Sundays. The fact that kids can have a great, safe, fun, engaging experience every Sunday matters. I have 2 kids in there. It matters to me a great deal. It matters to all of us that have those kids, that they have that place that they can be ministered to. It matters. Families in the community that can be fed, that can be reached out to even this time of year matters. And it takes all of us to do that. It's a big deal. The fact that we're able to partner with schools is huge, and it's only because of all of us partnering for this common goal. It's essential what we're doing. And the gospel, even last week we had our missionary to India here. The gospel going worldwide is because of you, because of your willingness to invest in the kingdom of God, not just here, but around the world is important. And it's only possible because of all of us that are here, all of you in this room. So let me just close by saying two things. First, if you are actively serving in some capacity here, thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your willingness to jump on board, even in the area you may not feel super called to or super gifted at. You're just, hey, what can I do? How can I help? How can I serve? I'm going to jump in. Thank you for that willingness to do that. Again, it's essential. And hopefully you've seen some of those benefits we talked about, the relational benefit. Maybe you've grown close to someone that you serve with on a certain team that otherwise wouldn't have happened except for serving. Maybe you have sensed, and maybe you're newer at serving, and in the last few months you felt sort of this closeness to the Lord that you can't really put a finger on. I would say at least part of that, if not a big part of that, is serving. We draw closer to each other and to the Lord when we serve through the local church. So thank you for being a servant leader of this church, a leader of leaders. And the second thing I'll say as we close is if you don't serve in some area, why not make today a time to consider that? Jumping on board in some area. Figuring out a way that I can leverage, what I'm good at, what I'm passionate about, to serve in some way. Just being invested in the cause. It shows value in the church. It makes that sacrifice. It adds to the energy of the church, and it builds those relationships. So here's how we can do that. If you have the YouVersion Bible app, on the very bottom of the notes is a link to it's a get involved link. It's on our website, and it's basically this involvement card here that I have a bunch of. So it's this. Different areas to get involved with, and it goes straight to my email. So if you want to do that on the Bible app or on our website, do that. We also have these involvement cards right here that you can take one before you leave. And I'm not saying you have to do it today. I'm not trying to put a pressure or, this is not an infomercial. It's an opportunity. So if you want to say, yeah, what can I do? Pray about it this week. Take a couple weeks to pray. What can I do? How much can I sacrifice? What am I passionate about? What area might be a good fit? Just take that and prayerfully consider how you can increase or begin your involvement here through the local church. Because the benefits are amazing. The relational benefits, the spiritual benefits, again, feeling like I'm a part of something that's big in the community is worth the investment and the sacrifice in that. So I would ask that we all prayerfully consider how we can jump on board, how we can get involved, how we can be an active, vibrant, vital, essential part of what God is doing through this local church.